The air conditioning unit in my new little apartment was barely holding up against the summer heat, but honestly I didn't care. I was savoring the quiet. For the first time in 12 years I wasn't running on fumes, checking emails at 3 a.m., or putting out fires lit by other people's incompetence. I was finally, truly resting. I had been out of Alpha Solutions for exactly 1 week. That's how long it took. I remember that morning so clearly. I was sitting on my cheap, slightly wobbly balcony chair sipping coffee and reading a novel. A novel, can you believe it? Not a P&L report, not a client contract, just a story for pleasure. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, definitely not a contact I'd saved. I almost ignored it, figuring it was spam. But something, maybe the ghost of my former hyper-vigilance, made me pick up. Hello, this is Olivia. The voice on the other end was frantic, clipped, and instantly familiar. It was Mr. Henderson, the CEO of SynergyTech, our largest client. SynergyTech alone accounted for about 30% of Alpha Solutions' annual revenue, and I had personally managed their account for the past 8 years. We'd built their entire backend system from the ground up. Olivia. Thank God I got you. I tried calling the main line, but it just loops. Is this your personal number? Look, I need you to tell me what is going on over there. My team just sent me the report for the Q3 migration audit, and honestly I don't recognize half of the code, and the budget variance is completely out of control. We were assured you were overseeing this transition. Where are you? My heart did a slow, heavy flip in my chest. I took a deliberate, slow sip of my coffee, buying a moment of calm. I had planned for this moment, maybe not this specific call, but a call like this. I just hadn't expected it to happen so fast. A week. 7 days. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice measured and professional, I appreciate you calling, but I am no longer with Alpha Solutions. I left the company exactly 7 days ago. The silence on the line was thick, punctuated only by the distant sound of city traffic and my struggling AC unit. Then he exploded, not in anger at me but in sheer panic. You left? What do you mean you left? Who approved that? I spoke to Leo just yesterday and he said everything was under control. Who is managing the SynergyTech account now? Who is reviewing the legacy code? Olivia, this is critical. We are due to present to the board next month. I felt a strange mix of vindication and profound sadness. Vindication because this was the inevitable consequence of what my brother Leo had done. Sadness because it meant the company I had literally poured my life into, the business built on family trust and grueling effort, was already beginning to fracture. I remembered the exact conversation with Leo barely 2 weeks ago. We need new leadership, Olivia. You're too cautious, too slow. It's time for Alpha Solutions to scale, and frankly you're holding us back. You should step aside. His words, delivered with a casual cruelty over lunch, had felt like a physical blow. He wanted me out. He got what he wanted. Mr. Henderson, I was informed that my services were no longer needed. Leo is the sole acting CEO now, and I believe he assigned the account to a new junior manager. I honestly don't have the details. My involvement with Alpha Solutions is completely terminated. He sputtered. A junior manager? Are you kidding me? This is a multi-million-dollar contract. Olivia, listen to me. I don't care about their internal drama. I care about my business. Can you off the books just tell me what's going on with the code? That was the line. The ethical boundary. I took a deep breath. I legally cannot do that, Mr. Henderson. I signed paperwork. However, if you are dissatisfied with the service you are currently receiving, I strongly suggest you review the terms of your contract with Alpha Solutions and decide your next steps. I knew what that meant. It meant he was going to pull the plug. SynergyTech wouldn't tolerate this level of incompetence or risk. Leo had just lost 30% of his company's revenue, and he didn't even know it yet. Before I move on, tell me, where are you watching this story right now and what time is it? Drop a comment below. I love hearing where my friends are tuning in from. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking a little, but not from distress. From the realization of just how right I had been. Leo thought the company ran itself. He thought the clients were loyal to the name on the building, not the person who answered their calls at midnight and fixed their problems. But that was just the first call. My coffee was still warm when my phone rang again. This time it was Ms. Petrov from Omni Media. Another major account. Another frantic voice. The dominoes were starting to fall, and I had a front row seat to the collapse of the empire I had helped build. This was my revenge, served cold, unintentional, and utterly devastating. The satisfaction was complicated, heavy, and yet undeniably sweet. It was time to remember how we even got here in the first place. To really understand why Mr. Henderson's call was such a massive blow, and why it was so deeply satisfying, we have to go back 12 years, to the very beginning of Alpha Solutions. My brother Leo had just graduated college with a degree in business management. I, on the other hand, had dropped out of my third year of computer science because, honestly, the practical application of building things always thrilled me more than the theory. Leo was the ideas man, the charismatic one, the guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. I was the engine, the structure, the person who actually figured out how to build the ice machine, where to put it, and how to maintain it. Alpha Solutions started in our parents' dusty garage. I remember the smell, a mix of stale pizza, soldering fumes, and pure, unadulterated ambition. Leo had convinced a small local printing shop, Quick Print, that they needed a custom inventory management system. He came home, slapped the initial $500 check on the table and said, "Okay sis. You build it, I'll sell the next one." For the next 5 years, it was just the two of us. We were inseparable professionally, tied together by a shared dream that became our 80-hour-week reality. I was the chief technology officer and the de facto chief operations officer. I managed every project, wrote most of the critical code, handled client integrations, and dealt with the inevitable late-night crises. I built the infrastructure, the processes, and, crucially, the relationships. I was the person who ensured the work was technically sound, delivered on time, and exceeded expectations. I knew every line of code we had ever shipped and every client's favorite brand of coffee. Leo was fantastic at the big picture. He was the face. He wore the nice suits, gave the smooth presentations, and landed the big contracts. He brought in the opportunities. I converted those opportunities into successful, repeatable business. It was a perfect, albeit exhausting, partnership. We even had a little handshake routine we'd do whenever a major contract closed. A silly, complicated thing involving fist bumps and snapping fingers that always made us laugh. A genuine connection that transcended the stress. We were family after all. Leo was 3 years older than me, and growing up he was always my protector. If I was having trouble with homework, he'd patiently walk me through it. If someone teased me at school, he was the first one to defend me. That foundation of fierce loyalty was why I never questioned the equity split, even though my hours were longer and my role was technically more specialized. It was 50-50. We built it together, right? Over those 12 years, we grew from 2 kids in a garage to a full-fledged technology consulting firm with a sleek downtown office and 40 employees. Our first big break came when I designed a proprietary flexible data migration architecture that allowed companies to switch platforms seamlessly with almost zero downtime. It was brilliant, and it was mine. That was the key differentiator that allowed Leo to bring in clients like SynergyTech and Omnimedia. They didn't come for Leo's charm alone. They came for Olivia's stable, functional, best-in-class product delivery. But as the company grew, something shifted in Leo. He started spending less time in the office and more time at networking events and golf courses. He delegated almost all of his previous sales duties, opting instead for the role of the visionary leader. When we hit the 10-year mark, Leo started talking less about the clients and more about brand positioning and disruptive growth strategies. He grew increasingly uncomfortable with the tedious but critical aspects of management I handled: payroll, infrastructure maintenance, quality control, and client retention. He saw them as beneath him. "Olivia, we need to think bigger," he'd say, leaning back in his expensive leather chair, the one he insisted on buying even though the old one was perfectly fine. "You are too focused on the weeds. We need aggressive scaling. I want to double our headcount next year." I'd counter calmly, "Leo, we can't double our headcount until our training infrastructure is scaled up. And honestly, the market isn't there for us to sustain that much overhead right now. If we grow too fast, our quality drops, and that's the one thing our reputation is built on." I was the realist. I was the gatekeeper of quality and sustainability. And slowly, Leo began to see me not as his partner, but as his biggest obstacle. Our playful handshakes stopped happening. The late-night strategy sessions became tense, one-sided arguments. He stopped seeing the blood, sweat, and midnight oil I poured into keeping the machine running perfectly, and only saw my cautious stance on his grand high-risk plans. He started introducing me at meetings not as his co-founder or CTO, but as my sister Olivia, who manages the technical staff. The subtle sidelining was painful, a slow erosion of my identity within the company I had built. I was becoming invisible, reduced to a functional commodity, while Leo basked in the glory of the success I had largely manufactured. The relationship, once the iron foundation of the business, was starting to show deep structural cracks. And soon, Leo was going to smash the whole thing apart. I noticed the shift really pick up speed about 18 months ago. That's when Leo started making the decisions that felt less like strategic moves and more like attempts to establish dominance. He started hanging out with this group of hyper-aggressive, young tech startup CEOs, the kind who measure success by valuation rather than actual profit. He came back from those lunches buzzing with ideas that sounded great in a pitch deck but were fundamentally unsound for a business built on stable, high-trust consulting. "We need to stop being so reliant on these legacy clients, Olivia," he announced one Monday morning, dismissing SynergyTech and Omni Media, the clients who paid the actual bills as if they were minor inconveniences. "We need to pivot to a subscription-based SaaS model. Recurring revenue, high growth potential, the whole 9 yards." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Leo, that would require us to overhaul 70% of our infrastructure, retrain every single employee, and potentially alienate every client we currently have. Our strength is bespoke solutions, not off-the-shelf software. We are a consulting firm, not a product company." "That's the problem, Olivia," he sighed, the dismissal in his tone like a slap. "You see obstacles. I see opportunities. You're stuck in the past. We need to be agile." Then came the new hires. He started bringing in young, freshly minted MBAs who had zero practical experience in technology but could talk a good game about synergy and optimization. They were his yes men. They agreed with every grand, sweeping, unrealistic idea he had, and they subtly undermined my authority whenever I tried to maintain technical standards or budgeting discipline. There was one instance in particular that cemented the layered conflict. We had a contract with a mid-sized healthcare provider. The project required meticulous data security protocols, and my team had designed a triple redundancy system to meet strict HIPAA compliance. It was complex, expensive, but non-negotiable. Leo, eager to show off his new hire's supposed efficiency, tasked a young manager named Kyle, fresh out of business school, to streamline the budget. Kyle, who understood security protocols about as well as a fish understands flying, cut a corner I explicitly warned him against. He decided to use a cheaper single-point encryption layer that saved us about $20,000 on the overall budget, presenting it to Leo as a genius cost-saving measure. Leo, loving the sound of cost-saving, approved it without consulting me, the CTO or the general counsel. When I found out, I went ballistic. I pulled Leo aside, my voice dangerously low. "Leo, that is a catastrophic risk. If that single point of failure is breached, we face millions in fines and could lose our entire healthcare portfolio." Kyle risked the entire business for $20,000. Leo just shrugged, completely unbothered. "You're being dramatic, Olivia. You always exaggerate the technical risk." Kyle has a fresh perspective. He's thinking outside the box. You need to trust the new team. Besides, the client approved the revised budget. The client approved the budget that you presented without understanding the security implications. That's negligence, Leo. That's not how we built this company. "This is how we grow it, Olivia," he countered, the arrogance radiating off him. "You're resistant to change. You like things safe and predictable. But safe and predictable doesn't get you a 9-figure valuation." This wasn't just about a budget. It was a moral dilemma. Was I complicit in this reckless behavior if I stayed? I was forced to quietly order my senior team to implement the triple redundancy system anyway, absorbing the cost secretly under emergency infrastructure allocation, knowing I was directly disobeying Leo but saving the company from itself. I couldn't tell him because if I did, he would fire the engineers who did the right thing. The secondary challenge was the sheer mental fatigue. Every day became a battle to protect the company's integrity against its own CEO. I was managing my team, managing the clients, and now managing Leo's dangerous whims. I started drinking too much coffee, sleeping too little, and feeling a gnawing anxiety I hadn't felt since the first year of the business when we almost went bankrupt. I tried talking to him, appealing to the brother I knew, the partner who shared that silly fist bump ritual. "Leo, remember the quick print job? We promised quality. We promised stability. We're losing sight of that. We're becoming exactly what we hated. The company that prioritizes profits over people and safety." He just looked at me with cold, distant eyes. You sound like Mom Olivia. Preaching to me. Come the suit. I make the final decisions. If you can't get on board with the new direction, maybe this isn't the place for you anymore. That was the first time the idea of being pushed out became real. It added a profound layer of hurt. It wasn't just a business disagreement. It was a betrayal of the loyalty, the shared sweat, and the family bond we had relied on for over a decade. He wasn't just my business partner, he was my older brother. And he was actively choosing the flash and excitement of disruptive growth over the foundation, the quality, and the sister who had been his co-pilot for 12 years. The rising tension became palpable in the office. Employees started whispering. My senior team was loyal to me, but they were nervous. They saw Leo's erratic behavior, the influx of inexperienced managers, and the drop in technical standards. They knew the ship was listing. I felt a tremendous responsibility to them, the people who relied on Alpha Solutions for their mortgage and their kids' tuition. But I was fighting a losing battle against an increasingly arrogant and detached CEO, my own brother. I started documenting everything. I kept meticulous records of every warning I gave, every cost-cutting measure I blocked, and every reckless decision Leo approved. I wasn't sure why I was doing it. Maybe to protect myself, maybe to protect the legacy of the company I loved. But deep down, I knew I was preparing for the inevitable explosion. I was waiting for the moment when the pressure cooker of Leo's ego and my refusal to compromise quality would finally blow. And when it did, I knew I needed to have the facts ready. The loyalty I once felt for Leo was being replaced by a calculated self-preservation, tinged with immense sorrow over the loss of my brother, the partner. The stakes were no longer just financial. They were intensely personal and emotional. The explosion finally happened not with a bang but with a cold corporate chill that cut straight to my core. It was 3 weeks after the healthcare debacle, and I had successfully contained the security risk, though Leo still didn't know I had defied his budget cuts. We were preparing for the quarterly board meeting, a formality since we were the only 2 major shareholders, but necessary for reporting purposes. I walked into the boardroom expecting the usual tense but professional exchange. Instead, Leo was sitting there flanked not just by the new yes men, Kyle and another hire Mark, but also by a sleek, unsmiling woman in a sharp suit who I immediately recognized as a high-powered corporate attorney from a firm known for handling hostile takeovers and forced resignations. My stomach dropped. Leo didn't even offer me a chair. He just stared at me, his eyes completely devoid of the warmth that once defined our brotherhood. It was pure CEO mode, clinical and impersonal. Olivia, he began, his voice flat. I think we both know this partnership is no longer working. Your resistance to change and your inability to adopt the necessary vision for aggressive growth are severely impeding Alpha Solutions' potential. He paused, a dramatic flair I recognized from his early sales pitches, now turned against me. Therefore, it's time for new leadership. Effective immediately, I am activating the necessary clauses in our shareholder agreement. I need you to step aside. I stood there, paralyzed for a split second, the betrayal washing over me like an icy wave. New leadership. That phrase, the same one he used casually over lunch weeks ago, now felt like a lethal weapon. Step aside. I finally managed, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Leo, I built the entire operational framework of this company. I manage 90% of our active accounts. You want me to just walk away from 12 years of my life because I refuse to compromise client security? The attorney, Ms. Chin, slid a packet of papers across the massive mahogany table. The documents detail a separation agreement, Ms. Olivia. It includes a fair buyout of your existing equity, a standard non-compete clause for 18 months within the immediate tri-state area, and a confidentiality agreement. I ignored the lawyer and focused on Leo. You're doing this? You're pushing your own sister out? After all we built, after the garage, after all the nights we slept on the floor just to meet a deadline. Leo's mask didn't slip. This isn't personal, Olivia. This is business. Alpha Solutions has outgrown you. It needs a different kind of leader. One who isn't afraid to take risks and scale rapidly. I'm taking the company in a new direction. You're welcome to take the buyout and move on. The drama of the moment was crushing. This wasn't a business failure. It was a family one. The man who taught me how to ride a bike was now professionally executing me. But as the initial shock subsided, a strange calm descended. I looked at the three sycophants sitting there: Leo, the power-drunk CEO, Kyle, the incompetent budget cutter, and Mark, who just nodded dumbly at everything. I realized they genuinely believed Alpha Solutions would continue to function seamlessly once I was gone. They thought I was an easily replaceable cog. They fundamentally misunderstood the value I brought. And that was the turning point. I could have fought. I had the documentation of Leo's reckless decisions. I could have dragged him through months of messy litigation, exposed his incompetence, and potentially destroyed the company in the process. But what would that achieve? Victory over my own brother? An ugly Pyrrhic win? No. The company was already poisoned by his ego and bad decisions. Fighting him meant tearing down the beautiful structure I had spent 12 years building just to spite him. Instead, I looked at the contract. The non-compete was laughably restrictive for 18 months, but the buyout was decent. Leo, in his rush to get rid of me, had valued my half of the company based on its potential high-growth valuation, not its actual stable earnings, meaning he was overpaying significantly to make me go away fast. I pushed the documents back across the table. You know what, Leo? Fine. You want new leadership? You can have it. I accept your terms. Leo looked genuinely surprised. He probably expected a tearful plea or a furious threat. I have two conditions, I continued, my voice now completely steady. First, I sign today, but my official last day is 1 week from now. I need 7 days to perform a clean, professional handover. I will document every client, every process, and every critical system access point. I will ensure absolute continuity. Second, I walk out with every personal possession, including the laptop I used to write the core data migration architecture. Leo smirked, sensing victory. A week. Done. You can take your old laptop. But the system access must be fully transferred to Kyle. It will be, I promised. And that was the lie that sealed his fate, though it wasn't a lie of omission. It was a lie of interpretation. I would transfer access, but I wouldn't transfer the tribal knowledge, the deep relationships, or the institutional memory that was Alpha Solutions. Over the next 7 days I followed through, but with a quiet, lethal precision. I documented everything, except the small, critical shortcuts and relationships that only I maintained. I transferred login details, but not the context of why those systems were set up that way. I meticulously listed all client contacts, but I didn't tell Kyle which clients were managed entirely by emotional trust rather than contracts. I handed over the keys to a perfectly maintained engine, but I kept the maintenance manual, which was only in my head. I made the decision: I wouldn't destroy Alpha Solutions. I would simply remove its foundation and let Leo try to hold up the roof with sheer charisma. I gave him exactly what he wanted, the entire company unchallenged. And I walked away knowing that the company's dependency on me was its single biggest vulnerability, and I had just exposed it entirely. The revenge would be purely passive, the inevitable consequence of his own short-sighted arrogance. I signed the papers on Friday afternoon. By Monday morning I was officially gone. I spent the first few days reveling in the silence, processing the end of a huge chapter, and trying to decide what to do next. The buyout money was safe enough to give me a year or two of breathing room, but sitting still was never my strong suit. I started sketching out ideas for a small, specialized consulting firm, one where quality, ethics, and deep technical expertise were the only core values. Then came the phone call from Mr. Henderson, exactly 1 week after my departure, the one that started this whole story. His panic-stricken voice confirmed everything I had suspected. The dominoes, which I had carefully placed during my 7-day handover, were falling spectacularly fast. After I hung up with Mr. Henderson, the floodgates opened. Omnimedia's Ms. Petrov called next. She wasn't as panicked as Henderson, but her tone was ice-cold. Olivia, can you explain why the Q3 reporting dashboard has been returning a zero-value error for the past 48 hours? We have a major presentation tomorrow. I've spoken to Kyle and he keeps saying he can't find the correct API key. You were the only one who ever managed the direct database connection. I smiled faintly. The direct database connection. That wasn't an API key issue. It was a highly specialized, secure connection I had designed years ago that required a unique handshake protocol. I had documented the steps to activate the connection, but I hadn't documented the underlying logic or the hidden secondary verification method. A small, non-essential piece of code in a completely different system that was the real key. I never documented it because no one else needed to know it. It was my safety net against unauthorized access. I hadn't lied. I had transferred the access points I used, but no one could figure out how to successfully utilize them without my intimate knowledge. Miss Petrov, I replied, maintaining my calm, professional distance, I am so sorry to hear you're experiencing difficulties. As you know, I am no longer involved with Alpha Solutions. My understanding is that Kyle is now fully responsible for your account. I suggest you press him for a solution immediately. We are pressing him, Olivia, she snapped, frustration mounting. He's completely out of his depth. He keeps promising to call you to ask for help. Olivia, please. We've worked together for 10 years. Tell me where that handshake key is. It's confidential, I know, but this is destroying us. It was a tough moment. I felt genuine sympathy for Ms. Petrov. She was a great client, a genuinely good person who was now caught in the crossfire of Leo's ego. But my revenge wasn't against the clients, it was against Leo. If I gave her the answer, I was saving him and he would never learn the lesson. Miss Petrov, I wish I could help you, but I simply can't. My contract is very clear. Anything I say now could be considered a breach. You have a few options. Terminate your contract immediately, or hold Leo fully accountable for the disruption of service. I would recommend reviewing your service level agreement for failure to perform. I knew she would terminate. He had a massive business to run. Loyalty only extends so far when your entire operational stability is threatened. Omni Media was the next domino. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming, not just from clients but from my old senior managers. They were terrified and desperate. Olivia, it's David. Look, I know you left, but the internal server is flagging critical system errors. Leo told Kyle to just reboot the whole thing, but that will take down 3 client platforms. I can't get him to listen. He's telling us to ignore the warnings and focus on new client acquisition targets he's setting up. This was the terrifying twist. Leo was so obsessed with the future and the vision that he was completely ignoring the present reality of the company dissolving around him. He wasn't even attempting to fix the chaos. He was running away from it, trying to land bigger deals to cover the hemorrhaging revenue, a classic move of an insecure leader. I told David gently that I couldn't intervene, but I advised him to do what was ethically right and protect the remaining clients, regardless of Leo's orders. I knew David and the other loyal engineers. They would quietly protect the code and the systems they built, but they wouldn't have the authority or the expertise to replace my operational role. The big climax came late that week when Leo himself finally called me. Not Mr. Henderson, not Miss Petrov, but Leo. He called me from the office, not his cell, the office line, and he sounded nothing like the arrogant CEO who had pushed me out. He sounded like the panicked little brother who had just crashed his car. Olivia, you have to come back, he pleaded, the polished veneer completely shattered. It's a disaster. SynergyTech terminated their contract this morning. Omni Media is preparing litigation. 3 smaller clients just switched to our competitor, Apex Consulting. The systems are unstable and Kyle can't figure out the database link. He says you didn't document it properly. I documented everything required by the transfer agreement, Leo, I said, my voice calm, almost emotionless. Perhaps Kyle isn't as competent as you believed. He's not. He's a total idiot. I need you to fix this, Olivia. We're going to be bankrupt by the end of the month if you don't step in. I'll give you a controlling stake. I'll make you president. Just fix it. The offer, the frantic desperation, was the most satisfying moment of the whole ordeal. He was finally acknowledging my true worth. But it was too late. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a savior. Leo, I said, and this was the true resolution, the final closure on my old life. I built Alpha Solutions for 12 years. I managed its operations, protected its integrity, and earned the trust of those clients. You decided that my expertise was a hindrance, that new leadership was needed, and you paid me handsomely to leave. You got exactly what you wanted. A company completely free of my caution and expertise. You made your bed. Now you have to manage it. I hung up the phone. I didn't return his subsequent calls or texts. I had given him the rope and he had used it to hang the company we built. I didn't destroy Alpha Solutions. I just removed the one person who knew how to sustain it, and Leo's arrogance and incompetence did the rest. The ultimate twist was that my revenge wasn't in doing anything. It was in doing nothing at all. The collapse of Alpha Solutions didn't happen overnight, but it was swift and brutal. Leo managed to limp along for another 4 months, primarily burning through the capital he received from my buyout and selling off non-essential assets. He lost every major client I had managed, and the instability quickly spread to the smaller accounts. The reputation for stability and excellence I had carefully cultivated was replaced by a widespread understanding that Alpha Solutions was a sinking ship led by an erratic captain. My old senior team, David, Sarah, and a few others, didn't stay long. They were loyal to the work, not to Leo's disastrous management style. I kept in touch with them, offering advice and moral support, watching as they secured better positions elsewhere. David, in fact, became the lead project manager for Apex Consulting, the competitor who absorbed several of Alpha Solutions' most important former clients. The irony was thick. Apex essentially profited from Leo's hubris and my strategic retreat. Leo tried every desperate measure imaginable. He reached out to venture capitalists, trying to sell them on his vision for the future. But the reality of his rapidly deteriorating balance sheet and the flood of client litigation quickly scared off any serious investors. The final, painful moment came about 6 months after my departure. Alpha Solutions filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The company I co-founded, the entity that had consumed 12 years of my professional life, was officially dissolved. I read the news article in the quiet of my apartment. There was a small, grainy picture of the sleek downtown office building. I felt a wave of sadness, not for the failure of Leo but for the death of the dream. The garage, the late nights, the silly handshake, the genuine hard work that had been invalidated by his selfishness. It was a mournful ending to a spectacular beginning. But here's the most important part of the story, the real resolution. My own twist of fate. Remember how I spent those first few weeks sketching out a new business plan? I realized that the value Leo underestimated wasn't just my management skill. It was the trust one had built with the clients. After the dust settled and Alpha Solutions officially went under, I started getting professional inquiries, not frantic calls. Olivia, Ms. Petrov from Omni Media called, this time calm and respectful. I know you're technically still in a non-compete for a few more months, but I heard Alpha Solutions is gone. When that non-compete expires, I want to be your first client. I need stable, honest technical management, and frankly, you're the only person I trust. Mr. Henderson from SynergyTech made a similar offer. I'm looking for a boutique firm, Olivia. I need someone who understands legacy systems and security without the ego of disruptive growth. Your name is the only one my board will accept. The non-compete eventually expired, and I didn't just start a new company. I started the company I had always wanted to build, Integrity Tech Solutions. My first 2 clients were SynergyTech and Omni Media. My core team consisted of David, Sarah, and 2 other engineers who had fled Alpha Solutions. We focused exclusively on bespoke solutions, transparency, and relentless quality control. Within the first year, Integrity Tech was profitable, stable, and rapidly building a reputation for being the firm you hired when failure was not an option. It was everything Alpha Solutions was supposed to be, without the toxicity of Leo's management. The lesson I learned was profound. True value isn't found in flashy titles or aggressive scaling. It's found in reliability, integrity, and the deep personal trust you build through consistent, excellent performance. Leo thought he owned the company because his name was on the CEO plaque. He didn't understand that I was the company. I was the intellectual property, the institutional memory, and the client relationships. When he forced me out, he essentially amputated the brain and the heart, leaving behind a beautifully decorated corpse. As for Leo, I haven't spoken to him since that desperate phone call. I know he tried to start a few other ventures, relying on the same old charm, but without the foundation of my technical expertise, they all fizzled out quickly. He lost everything: the company, the prestige, and ultimately our relationship. He got his buyout money, but he squandered it chasing unworkable dreams. Do I feel bad? Honestly, sometimes. I lost my brother, or at least the brother I grew up with. But I don't regret the outcome. I didn't seek to destroy him. I simply allowed him to face the consequences of his choices. I handed him the entire kingdom he so desperately wanted, and he revealed that he had absolutely no idea how to rule it. My revenge wasn't loud or manipulative. It was simply my absence. I gave him exactly what he asked for, and the universe delivered the inevitable, painful result. I walked away with my dignity, my capital, and my reputation intact, and used all three to build something far better, far more stable, and entirely my own. So if you take anything away from this story, let it be this. Always know your own worth and never let anyone convince you that the quiet, essential work you do is less valuable than the loud, flashy titles. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stand back, keep your hands clean, and let arrogance meet its fate. If you enjoyed hearing Olivia's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more true tales of dramatic revenge and life lessons. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Olivia's position? Drop a comment below.